You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I am your host, Carl Dumler, and with me, as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, this is, I guess, one of those weeks where season's kind of over. I mean, the Broncos have been eliminated from the playoffs and kind of a down time, but I don't know. It's one of those seasons, I guess I didn't expect the Broncos to be great, but yet it's still hard to admit that they're not in the playoffs.
I swear that before the season, I said that this was a team that was going to finish 7-9 to 8-8, and I think if they still had Chris Harris Jr. and Emmanuel Sanders, that they would have finished right there. So, issues with the entering the season. I said the Broncos got an improved roster on last season. I think we can still agree that's true, but the biggest issues with them were questions at the quarterback position, questions at the head coach position, and talent in the back seven of the defense. And after the offensive line got an injury, so that kind of reared its head as well. But I mean, this is probably exactly what I expected this season, really. I feel like the actual wins against the Chargers and the Steelers were out of the ordinary as far as what I was expecting. But then you have the Broncos losing to the 49ers and the Browns, 2 games that I thought they'd win. So I guess in the end it evens out. Broncos looking like they're going to finish 6-10 to 8-8. So that's where we are as a team. That's, luckily we're going to have some draft capital to mess around with this season. We'll see where we finish. We'll maybe have some talk at that at the end, but yeah, it's time for, although it's going to be the off season, it's about to be the bread and butter time of this podcast, the building the Broncos. So we're going to be talking off season, free agents, trades, and of course the NFL draft.
It's true. I mean, that is the nice thing for us is this is the time of year that we love. Broncos, it sounds like they're going to have a ton of cap space. So the Broncos are going to be able to make some aggressive moves, which is exciting for us. And like I said, I mean, if we might have top 10, top 12 kind of pick in the draft again. And I don't know. So there's some good things going on in this rookie class. You got to give them props for what they're doing for this Bronco team and some other players that have stepped up. So there's a lot of good, but there's still a lot of work to do. That's for sure. This is not a done deal rebuilding project for sure yet, but
oh man, they're far from that.
yeah, but it's gonna be a fun off season, and we're excited to talk about that on this Building the Broncos podcast that is focused on all things that pertain to your Denver Broncos, especially as it does, like we said, relate to the NFL draft and team building. With Nick and myself being armchair GMs, we'll be bringing you fresh insight and analysis each and every week in every single episode, from scouting the enemy, player values, scheme and personnel fits, and just a little general football-related banter. You can follow myself on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, as well as follow Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. Be sure to tweet us any questions or opinions you have because we live for talking Bronco football. You can also follow the podcast Twitter account at HuddleUpPod, and make sure you check out ours and our co-writers' written content at milehighhuddle.com, a part of 24/7 Sports and an affiliate of the CBS Sports Digital Network. We know your listeners are as football, draft, and Bronco crazy as we are, so please give us a click and subscribe to us on iTunes as well as Stitcher. And don't forget to share us on Facebook and Twitter. We wouldn't be here today without your listeners, so as a call to action, please go and take the time to go to iTunes or Spreaker and rate and subscribe to let your voices be heard on how you enjoy our show. Now, before we get going, we first want to say thank you to our great sponsor, Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. This is the perfect time of year with everybody getting ready to travel for the holidays. So again, that's www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. Well, Nick, I honestly didn't get to watch the game live. I was having a Christmas party, and I'm glad we had the Christmas party because that was a lot more fun than watching what the Broncos put on tape. But it's just another one of those games where it's just a few things here and there that make the difference between a win and a loss, and that's where this team is. They're just not that winning culture team yet. But there are some players that really stepped up. So who are 3 players you really liked in this past game against the Browns?
Well, number one for me would have to be Garrett Bowles. He started off the beginning of the game giving up some pressure, but going against Myles Garrett, who's one of the best young pass rushers in the entire NFL, especially when it comes to tools. I mean, I don't know if you saw my film piece before the game, but Myles Garrett just is some unbelievable athleticism and explosion. And for the most part, I felt like we had a pretty good game from Garrett Bowles. So he wasn't a perfect game by any means, but I'll take it against Myles Garrett. And I think he's shown enough over the last few weeks, at least since the bye week, that he's going to get a chance to be left tackle next year. So that's good. I mean, that class is a flaming pile at this point, but Garrett Bowles might develop into at least the league average left tackle. So I'll take that. Next up, Will Parks. I thought he had a pretty solid game, with Sua Cravens, the healthy and active. Will Parks stepped up, and honestly, I think he's been our best strong safety this entire season, and hopefully they'll the next 2 weeks, it doesn't feel like Cravens is going to be here for much longer, if at all. So we need to see what we have in Parks, and I thought he played well. And then finally, last but not least, Von Miller didn't have an incredible game, but broke the Broncos' all-time sack record, and another game with the sack. So he's been having a great season, and he's still in his peak. That his skills are probably going to start to wane a little bit over the next 2 seasons, but still a dominating edge rusher, pass rusher, face the franchise, and congrats to him on breaking the sack record.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, very good list. I loved watching Will Parks. He definitely was out there. I thought he was the one guy really bringing a ton of energy on the field. I mean, he was so excited to be out there in the game. And like I said, Garrett Bowles, I hardly noticed him. And when you can say that about a tackle, that's usually a pretty good game, especially against a guy like Myles Garrett. I mean, that's saying something for sure. Yeah. My 3, I went with Cortland Sutton. Thought he had a nice little bounce back game. I thought he did really well, making some tough catches, really putting pressure on that secondary for the Browns. I mean, the one touchdown the Broncos did get was set up by a pass interference call that he was able to get in the end zone. And I mean, it wasn't a perfect game, but it was a better game. And he's starting to show a little bit more that he can do some things with the short routes. Before it seemed to be just throw it up, let him go catch it down the field. This one, he actually made some plays in the middle of the field on some short routes. So I thought this was one of his better games that I've seen from him. And then Adam Gotsis, I thought he had a pretty good game, did well against the run, got a little bit of pressure here and there. I thought he and Wolf both had a pretty good game. They had a couple runs there at the end that they let get away, but beyond that, I thought they really did a good job containing the middle of the field there. And finally, I went on the other side. I know he didn't get a sack, but Bradley Chubb, I thought he was getting pressure the entire game. He just missed on a couple sacks. He was real close on a lot. And considering, I mean, we talked about it last episode, the Browns were giving up the least amount of pressure of any team in the NFL since what, like week 11?
Yeah, since like Williams took over.
And so the fact that the Broncos were actually getting pressure, and I thought they did really well just getting right there in the face of Baker Mayfield, making him make some very inaccurate throws. I thought it was one of his worst games of the season, and a lot of that had to do with what those front guys were doing. Yeah,
not bad. Yeah, Chubb, at this point, pulling for him to break the rookie sack record, I feel like that's the biggest thing left for this team that they can accomplish. I guess, beating the Raiders is always good. However, when we get to that section, there might be, I'm not saying the Broncos should lose to the Raiders, but there's some ramifications either way. But now for the stock down for me, number 1, again, has to be Case Keenum. He's been struggling since I wouldn't say totally struggling since the bye week, but he's just not playing great football right now. And we're seeing the total opposite. It's ebb and flow, I guess, with Case Keenum. The first few weeks, throwing the ball around the yard and throwing it to the other team like crazy. Team tells him to pull it back, play game manager. Okay, he does that. The Broncos get some wins. Then the other teams are deciding like, yeah, you know what, that Phillip Lindsay guy probably needs to be stopped. Let's see if Case Keenum can beat us. Do that, and everything goes into the crapper. So Case Keenum might be the quarterback next year. We'll see. Won't be certain about that until we get to that point. But maybe he be back. But either way, stock down for Case Keenum. Just been not good. I don't know, missing passes. I don't even know what to say. I need to go back and watch his game in succession, but he's just been a major letdown, I guess is the only way to put it.
I can't disagree with that. I mean, he definitely just a lot of throws underneath. I mean, he's quickly getting to the running backs, which, I mean, that there's nothing completely wrong with that, but if that's all you're doing and then that's all you can do on offense, then it's a very, very limited offense. I mean, teams, like you said, they've just been loading up. Let's play 10 yards and shorter and make him have to beat us over the top or beat us with accurate throws and tight pockets, and he just hasn't been able to answer that call, that's for sure.
And he's been erratic, and I understand he's better outside the pocket, but it looks like he's trying to escape the pocket too early to get on the move. Now, that could be the wrong marriage between quarterback and offensive coordinator. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But overall, Case Keenum does not look like the guy. You can probably try to build a better offense around him next season, fit him better with a better offensive coordinator if you have to. But you need pretty much a top 3 roster all the way around him to ever be a legit Super Bowl winner with Case Keenum, unless you just get ridiculously lucky. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And then the next stock down for me, healthy scratches. I think that says a lot about these teams going forward beyond this season. But, you have Sua Cravens, and I've heard some stuff about him that he's probably not going to be here next year, folks. I know some people were excited when they traded for him, but does not sound like Sua Cravens is going to be in the Broncos' plans beyond this season. Some work ethic questions there. So stuff that was an issue with him in the Washington sounds like it's following him here. So Broncos, I do think, get to keep a conditional pick if he's not on the roster by the new league year next year. There's something there. So maybe they can keep that 5th or 6th round pick, whatever it is. And then also Shane Ray. Shane Ray's time in Denver is over. Are they going to play him again? That's yet to be seen. But I think we can close the chapter on Shane Ray, or close the book on Shane Ray in Denver, and that another 1st round pick probably gone from the Broncos after this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's both those guys have been a huge letdown this season. Shane Ray, I mean, obviously lost his job to Chubb, but you would hope that would maybe, especially being a contract year, that this would be the year he'd really step up and say, okay, well, I'll prove to you that I was worth the 1st round pick, or at least I'm going to prove to my next team that I'm worth a huge contract, and he's done nothing of the sorts.
And he has been injured.
He has, but I mean, that's been his whole time in Denver.
Yep, you made my point for me. He's been injured. It was a setup. Yeah. That's been his time in Denver. You are exactly right.
All right. Well, my list, I went with Darian Stewart. I mean, it's still there's plays where he's supposed to be in coverage where he's not even within 5-10 yards of the guy he's supposed to be covering. I can't believe he's still starting. I mean, I know the Broncos are kind of at the end of the season, so it's just kind of like, keep throwing guys out there. But I'd rather see some of these young safeties get a chance to start over him right now.
We kind of did see some, and they flashed.
They did. DeMonte Thomas got that interception. That was a nice play. Again, though, every time I see Darian Stewart on the field, it's with a quarterback completing a pass to his guy and him always being that step behind. So I'm just not very impressed with him. Interior offensive line, again, just not the best game, run or pass. I mean, teams seem to be really, really bringing the blitz against those kind of guys and just saying, you three haven't hardly worked together. Let's just see how well your communication is. And it's not good. They've just been really struggling these last few games as teams have realized, hey, let's target this group and see if they can hold up. The tackles have done pretty well, but yeah, those interior guys, you can definitely tell. I know for a while there, a few weeks we're sitting there going, well, maybe we don't even need Paradis moving forward. And now I'm sitting here saying we need Paradis moving forward because he is that one guy that can communicate and get everybody where they're supposed to be. He's a huge integral part of that offensive line being successful.
I really agree with you there. Paradis was somebody I thought maybe we can move on from, and maybe, that still might be in the cards. Give that center a full offseason training camp OTAs to get all the checks and the line calls out. But the communication in the interior of the offensive line has been horrible, whether it be delayed blitzes or stunts, just passing guys off. They have struggled. I mean, even when the Broncos offensive line was looking good after that bye week there was issues with communication and passing guys off, and that's just been exasperated over the last few weeks. So, yeah, I can't disagree with you. Moving on now, we have the forward progress versus loss of down. And forward progress for me this week, if you're going to have Case Keenum be your quarterback, you need to make sure that you are doing stuff to make him comfortable. That's a heavy play action game, calculated shots down the field. But something that I really liked, especially early on in the game, that they did not do as much later, was using the tight ends. And I thought that when the offense was running more so through the tight ends, they can't have the tight ends be both the primary weapons in an offense in today's NFL. That's just going to be a limited offense. But I thought that the offense, or the usage of the tight ends in the offense itself, made everything look just a little bit better. And I think that's something that they need to continue doing if they're going to keep Case Keenum as the starting quarterback. So tight end usage for me.
And I will say I loved how well the tight ends were doing at getting yards after catch.
Yeah.
They picked up some tough first downs where they made some nice moves to break one tackle and pick up a first down. So kudos to those guys really stepping up, considering they've been put in a terrible situation. I mean, being fourth and fifth string kind of guys, and yet here they are asking to be starters and make plays, and I thought they did pretty well. Mine was pressure applied. Again, I mean, just talking about Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, Adam Gotsis, Derek Wolfe even got some pressure. I mean, there's just guys getting pressure on an offensive line that has not surrendered a ton of pressure. And so very impressed with that. Adam Gotsis' strip sack. I mean, that was a great pass rushing move. Loved it. I had to rewind it a couple times because it's so fun to see those interior guys win like that. And the Broncos just need more of it. Just need to see a little bit more consistency. And I'm hoping Gotsis with another offseason, maybe he can take that next step and become that all-around defensive end that we've been hoping for.
Yeah, he did look very good in this game. He had that big splash play against the Browns there at the end of the game. But he's been looking better, and next year is a contract year for him and Shelby Harris. So I don't think they're going to – if I were them, I would not pay either of those guys to be – my defensive lineman going forward and let them compete next year for the money. I don't think you can re-sign both those guys, but one of them. So, it's dependent on the week which one has played better between Shelby Harris and Adam Gotsis. So we will see. And it also depends on if they draft a defensive lineman, what techniques that defensive lineman is more comfortable with, where Harris has played more of a 1-3 technique kind of stuff, where Gotsis plays 4-5-3. So a little different. Loss of down for me, Bill Musgrave, just in general, this guy, I mean, he's done in Denver. He has not built an offense that makes sense. I have enjoyed his running scheme, but the passing scheme has been horrible. I mean, you're going against Greg Williams, who is renowned as one of the most blitz-happy minds in all of the NFL as far as defense goes, and you run, it looked like a verts concept against a cover zero, pretty much all-out blitz. There's no outlet or anything like that. I mean, I just don't get it. Just total lack of awareness as far as the play calling, the play design, et cetera, and it's been like that all season. I have enjoyed the run-blocking scheme, getting Philip Lindsay in space, specifically up the middle, creating space up the middle, which is an interesting usage for him, and it's worked. They've been explosive in the run game until teams have started clamping down and killing the run game, but the overall Bill Musgrave pass scheme just really bad, and he probably, I mean, he might be done in the NFL period. He might get a gig being a quarterback coach, but I think given how badly he's been in Denver, it's going to be a little bit before he has a chance at offensive coordinator again. Yeah,
his calls on especially third downs where the other team's going to blitz. What is the decision to do? Oh, let's send everybody on some kind of deep route that's going to take time to develop. No, get some underneath routes going. Get some crossers. Get some rub routes. All those kind of things that just get guys open in a hurry and help your quarterback out.
It's a space game.
Yeah, there was. I was just thinking about this of the interception in the end zone. I was so mad at that play call of having two wide receivers in the same area. I mean, if you want to keep that middle safety in the middle, have the other receiver run a middle route. Don't have them both run to the same corner. That was ridiculous. I mean, I think that could have been an actual touchdown if you were able to hold that safety. But just bad call when you have two guys occupying the same space. Very, very mad about that. Anyway, mine is coaching decisions. I mean, last week we saw where I guess Vance Joseph was maybe just too aggressive, and this week he went too conservative. He just can't seem to find that happy medium, or I think I read somewhere that his decision to kick that field goal on 4th and 1 decreased the Broncos' chances of winning that game by 33%. I mean, those are basic decisions. that you would think that you especially have your statistics guys sitting there in your ear telling you, hey, it says to go for it here. I mean, statistically wise, I mean, just go for it. And then, so again, this coaching staff just hasn't been up to snuff. Joe Woods is one guy that I would sit there and say maybe he's done his job pretty well this year, because I mean they have had some really good games against some pretty tough offenses, but beyond that, I mean, special teams. Okay, I got to give him credit too of what they've been able to do. Otherwise, it's just not been good for this team, and definitely easy to see it's just time to move on. I think Vance Joseph maybe down the road could become one of those good head coaches. Just that first time guy, just making too many mistakes, wasn't quite ready for the job. And I think it's becoming more and more obvious by the week.
Yep, he is. He's done. There's 0% chance he's back next year. So that is what it is. All right, now time for some injury updates from the Broncos. Before after we made this outline, it was announced that Chris Harris Jr. has been placed on IR for the season. There was some hope that he could be back for the playoffs, maybe the last week if they had a chance at the playoffs. But now the Broncos are officially eliminated from the playoffs. There's no reason to rush Chris Harris back. Keep that leg on ice, get better, and hopefully, or that foot on ice, I guess. And we'll see you next season, Chris Harris. And let's talk about Chris Harris this season for a bit. I thought early on in the season he struggled, especially the first quarter of the season, and then after that, something clicked, and he played some of his better ball. I felt like over weeks 5 through the injury.
I'm with you there. He looked a little bit slower to start off the season. I think there was a lot of, especially once Aqib Talib was gone, the communication in the secondary just went to crap. I mean, it was already starting to struggle a little bit once TJ Ward was gone, but especially all these young guys getting into position, and just you could tell on a lot of plays that Chris Harris was either expecting help or just something wasn't communicated right of who was supposed to be doing what. My guess is it wasn't Chris Harris making the mistake. Just knowing the work ethic that he has, and I don't think he likes some of the play calls that the coaches were making either. And so there was some of that. But yeah, once he really got going in the season, he was locked down. I thought one of the best games was his one against the Steelers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought he did a great job locking down his guy and allowing the Broncos to do a few things that they weren't able to do most of the rest of the season.
Yeah, overall a pretty good season. Another guy, I talked about Von Miller slowing down. Chris Harris Jr. is reaching that age where, you never know how many more years he has left. So we'll see what happens after this offseason. He's still got good years left. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he was playing at a high level, but if you remember Champ Bailey, his play dropped off a cliff when the time came. So that can happen. But we'll follow him going forward, and hopefully he'll be back stronger and better than ever next year, and hopefully with more talent around him in the secondary, because honestly, this might be the worst secondary he's ever been a part of for the Broncos. Just not a great unit this season. And then some other injuries to announce. We have Shaq Barrett, who's questionable for this week's game with a hip injury. I wouldn't be surprised if they shut him down as well, trying to keep him from A, getting injured worse than he already is, and B, trying to keep his value low for the offseason. I do think there's some interest to bring Shaq Barrett back, but obviously the dollars and cents has to make sense. But as far as a third edge rusher on this team, and one that is, I think, 4-3 and 3-4 versatile, and at least solid against the run, we're not a complete liability, I would love to have Barrett back, but we will see. It comes down to dollars and cents with him. And then the last injury worth announcing here, Isaac Yiadom, a guy that we were hoping that we would see to close out the season, but unfortunately for Denver, unfortunately for Yiadom, he is out for this game, most likely with a shoulder injury. And do you remember where he got injured? It was kind of a weird play. It was that one where he kind of stabbed at the ball against Dante Pettis after he caught that touchdown, and he hurt his shoulder just coming down on that. So
yeah, I remember that play.
Yeah. So yeah, not great. Would love to see him out there. They need him. I mean, last week there was a point where they were down to legitimately one cornerback healthy on the roster. So Yiadom, get back soon, because we need you, and we need to see if you could be a viable option to be a top 3 cornerback for this team next season. But if he's injured, he's injured. All right, well, moving on now to Week 16's game versus the Oakland Raiders, who, again, we like to sit here and we're not used to being in this position where the Broncos are as bad as they are. But the Raiders at least personally make me feel a little bit better to where the Broncos are. They trade Amari Cooper, Khalil Mack, bring back John Gruden, who hasn't been coaching in the NFL at any sort of level for years, and his scheme looks old and out of date. It's not always the best idea to reach back to your glory years. I mean, you move on for a reason. I'm not saying that just because it might pertain to the Broncos right now as well. But so the Raiders, not a good season, and they are, I believe, currently sitting at the second overall pick in the draft, although their first-round picks they got for trading Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper look like picks are going to be in the bottom half of the first round. So we'll see what the Raiders do with this draft, but not a very good team. A lot of injuries on their team, on the roster as well, and this is a toss-up. I think Broncos are favored by 2.5, but I wouldn't be surprised if this game goes either way because both of these teams are playing for pride at this point.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, this roster is pretty bad. I mean, when you trade away some of your best players, obviously, and it's crazy to watch Amari Cooper go to the Cowboys, and now he's looking like a top 10 receiver.
Oh, he is. I was going to say his numbers have been top 5 receiver, but I think top 10 makes sense.
Right. And it's just crazy. Sometimes that change of scenery is exactly what a wide receiver needs. I think especially there's just so much pressure there in Oakland when he was a top 5 pick to just be that top tier wide receiver. And he had, some drops there for a while and all those kind of things. And I think it just kind of got to him. So he's one of those guys, definitely a change of scenery has worked out well. But it's left this roster. I mean, there's maybe 3 or 4 players that you're sitting here saying, oh my gosh, that's actually a pretty good player. Beyond that, it's pretty far down. Derek Carr, I think he's a pretty good quarterback. He's behind a pretty terrible offensive line right now, which is crazy to say after a couple years ago where they were one of the best. And he's one of those guys, he just doesn't do well with pressure. I mean, it's been pretty bad this year, at least that I've seen. And beyond that, his weapons, he has Jared Cook. Can you point to anybody else in that weaponry that you're sitting there saying that's a real weapon? I can't.
Jordy Nelson used to be a real weapon.
Well, yeah.
That's about the best I can do for you there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and Jordy Nelson's been playing a little better over the last couple of weeks, but still, he's one of those guys when you look at careers that just nosedive because of injuries and age and everything else. I mean, he's the face of that. And it's not pretty. And they, like you said, they have an offense that just can't hardly do much, run or pass. I mean, they struggle in both of them. I mean, Carr has a high completion percentage, but that's because he's throwing everything 5 yards and shorter.
The offensive line is injured. I mean, it's a whole lot of bad right now. They don't have beast mode anymore. He's been put on IR since then. And Doug Martin and Jalen Richard have been okay there. If they had better passing game around them, then those guys would be much more viable. I think you can get away with that running back tandem, but there's just too many injuries. And the offensive line, which we kind of talked about here a little bit, has been decimated by injuries. What used to be a fantastic offensive line now is just totally different unit. You got left tackle Colton Miller still playing there, and he's been up and down the season. He actually looked a little better earlier in the season, and then since then has been just not as good. So Bradley Chubb will be a fun one to watch against him this week. But they still have Rodney Hudson playing center there, who's one of the best centers in the entire NFL. So he's one that's worth watching to see what happens in this game. But both the guards next to him are injured. You have Gabe Jackson, the right guard, was just put on injured reserve, and Kelechi Osemele is questionable for this game. And then the backup to Kelechi Osemele is out for the season as well. So it's a pretty injured offense right now, and especially one that used to be definitely prided on their offensive line work. It is a unit that has been decimated by injuries. So at least they can kind of relate to the Broncos there.
For sure. And I mean, we'll talk about some stats here with some of these guys, but this could be the game that Chubb breaks the rookie record. He's got a really good chance to break it in this game, especially if the Broncos can get an early lead and force the Raiders to have to pass. But switching over then to the defensive side of things, I mean, what's there to say? Gary and Conley's had kind of a bounce back year, but he's injured right now. Carl Joseph has been playing a little bit better, but again, he's kind of a draft bust for him. Arden Key has been up and down. Maybe the most consistent guy on their team has been Maurice Hurst.
Yeah, he's been really good. Let's be real. I mean, there's a reason he fell to the 5th round for them, because the injuries were serious, or the heart questions are serious. But he has been playing very well, and I would argue he's been their best player from that rookie class so far.
Oh, for sure. I agree. But beyond him, I just don't see anybody that I'm sitting here saying, ooh, that guy causes me to shake in my boots.
Yeah. No, it's you said the offense has been bad this year for the Raiders. I would argue that the defense is even worse. They are one of the looking at we'll get to the DVOA stuff here in a second, but looking at their roster, it's no doubt that this is one of the worst teams in the entire NFL. I mean, you got we'll touch on the defensive line first, but this is a team that has generated just so little pass rush pressure this season. They've sacks, you name it. They've just not been able to close the gap there. And they have PJ Hall in the middle, who is the 2nd round pick this year. Everybody thought he was a little bit too early of a draft pick for what he brings, but he's a nice young player there. Maurice Hurst, we talked about. Hankins is, I don't know if you've watched very many Raiders games recently, but he is an absolute load. He's got to be pushing like 350 pounds. Seriously, like I saw him I had a double take, and I literally said, holy cow, just an absolute tank. Doesn't mean he's a great player, but my goodness, what a massive human being. And then at edge rusher, Frosty Rucker, who's a guy that maybe some of you know. He played for the Bengals for a bit. Not a great player there. Arden Key been up and down this season for him. So yeah, this defensive line, there's a reason that everybody's been linking Joey Bosa to them, or Nick Bosa, excuse me, because the Raiders just really lack talent as far as the pass rushing department goes, and it's made the entire rest of the defense look abysmal and dreadful as well.
I can't disagree with any of that. It's just, you look at every level of this defense and you're sitting here saying, I just don't see enough talent. I mean, they need players at every level moving forward. You talk about the Broncos and their rebuild and what they all need. Broncos are miles ahead of where the Raiders are in the rebuild process.
Maybe the QB.
I can give you that if it's Derek Carr. I mean,
that's the big difference.
I just have to wonder a little bit with him. Has he lost a lot of that confidence? I mean, he's getting beat up left and right every single game. He's getting where he's looking like he did his rookie season. And what I saw his rookie season was a guy playing behind a terrible offensive line that was scared to hold on to the ball. And so he's just getting rid of it as quick as possible to his check down every single time. And is that something that he can get better at? Say that the offensive line improves, I'm sure he can get some confidence back. But even there, I mean, you look at that offensive line and you sit here and say, I mean, some of these guys are getting up there in age that are actually their top players, and the rookies are looking terrible. I think he's going to have a pretty bad offensive line moving forward here for a while.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be great for him either. So that's definitely something to watch. And you talking about him being bad under pressure, it really does remind me of the Drew Lock. So something to watch going forward. A little bit of a draft preview there. And then looking at the rest of this, the defense here, the back seven. I mean, you talked about earlier. What have you seen from Conley this season that has changed? Is it the fact that he's being allowed to play? Is that the biggest thing?
Well, that does help.
Yeah,
he's been that one guy that I've seen that seems halfway consistent on the field. The rest of the guys, you'll see him have a decent game every now and then, but he's the one guy that seems like each week does a pretty good job. I'm not saying that he's a star cornerback or anything like that, but he seems to be a little bit more consistent than the other guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there either. This is a kind of a boring pod. We're just agreeing with everything. But we got to be a little bit more Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith. Maybe you should start throwing out some fake news. But yeah, no, the defense is not good. Looking at it, Conley has been playing really well. We'll see if he will be able to play down the stretch here. That'll be a big question if he's, the concussion or whatnot, but he's really looked pretty good for them this season, looking like an actual potential number one cornerback for them. Other than that, though, it's not great. Darrell Worley is kind of a replacement level player. Carl Joseph has been a bust level first round pick. Markel Lee, he's a rookie there from Wake Forest playing middle linebacker, but he looks, or playing strong side linebacker, but he looks limited. And Tariq Whitehead, I mean, it's really bad defense, and I can't look at this roster and point out any game changers on the defense. Maurice Hurst is a potential one. Garyon Conley is a potential one. But other than that, it's just a whole lot of yuck.
Yeah, I had to laugh. Eric Harris made the PFF Team of the Week, but he was only in on 14 pass snaps this last week.
What?
And so they gave him a 92 grade. Because he had an interception in those 14 pass snaps and didn't give up a reception in the other ones. And I'm sitting here going, come on, this is why it's hard to take you guys serious sometimes, because, I mean, this guy's a part-time player. He makes one big play, and, he makes Team of the Week.
Yeah, it's probably need a little bit more qualification there.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And then looking at the special teams of the Raiders as well, they got Daniel Carlson from Auburn. He was with the Vikings earlier this season, and they cut him after he's had some struggles, and he's been pretty good, actually. I'm glad that another team gave him a shot because I did like him in college. And they have Dwayne Harris is their returner, who has been, I feel like he's been in the league for a long time at this point, but he's still returning kicks, and he's got a chance to do it. And you always got to love the dreadlocks that he runs with. Any player that runs with the dreadlock swag, I can get behind. And injuries, we talked about Gabe Jackson on the injured reserve now with a broken elbow. Conley's questionable with a concussion. Osimile is questionable with a toe injury. And then the backup linebacker and special teamer Kyle Wibbler is questionable with a hamstring. So it's pretty decimated Raiders roster. That said, the Broncos are decimated as well and also have talent deficiencies in key areas, just like the Raiders. So this is going to be an interesting game, and I would not feel confident putting money on either of these teams.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on this game if I'm a betting man.
Yeah. All right, well, now looking at some of the offensive and defensive statistics for the Raiders, their offense has been pretty putrid this season. They have averaged 343.9 yards per game, which is 23rd. Their pass game has been a little bit better, 244.8, although they are limited in the pass catcher department after Amari Cooper being traded. Cook has been their best weapon. He's pretty much the guy. I also do like Washington and Richard as pass catching backs out of the backfield, but I feel like they don't use them as much as they should there. Then from passing offense, it's 244.8 yards per game, which is 14th overall. Rushing game, just not great. The offensive line has been injured. The running backs are limited. 99.1 yards per game, which is 26th ranked. And then their points per game, only 18.6 points per game, under 20 points per game. So that is pretty darn pitiful, and Gruden, that does not reflect well on him. Sacks given up, talking about a team that used to be prided on offensive line, the sacks given up has been abysmal as well. They've given up 48th this season, which is 30th overall in the league. They have a -6 turnover differential, 20 total giveaways, 8 interceptions, and 12 fumbles. So they cough up the ball a lot. That's tied for the second worst fumble rate of any team in the NFL. Defensively, they give up a lot of yards per game as well. Another team that struggles. Yards per game and through the air, they're about middle of the road at 23.8. But then the rush yards, they give up rushing yards like crazy. So good news for Phillip Lindsay. If you got him on your fantasy roster, hopefully the Broncos can get some sort of run game going this week, which they haven't had for the past few weeks. But Raiders averaging the most yards given up of any team in the NFL at 146.4 yards per game. Points allowed is also the worst in the NFL at 29.9. They only have 12 sacks, which, get this, the next worst team, 24 sacks with Miami. So Oakland they'd have to double their sack total on the season to just get up to the second worst sack total team in the NFL. It is unbelievable how bad their pass rush is.
This might be the worst pass rush I've ever seen in football.
Yeah, we say that, and then we're going to see the Broncos' interior offensive line get dominated by Maurice Hurst for 6 sacks. I shouldn't have said that. He jinxed the hell out of them. Takeaways are not good at taking the ball away either. 14 on the season, 3 fumbles, and 11 interceptions. So they do take it away through the air somewhat, but they're not really creating fumbles, and they fumble it a lot. So that's something to look forward for the coaching corner part. But overall, the Raiders team have a bad record, and the stats show that for sure. That is the correct call. This is a bad Raiders team, and it's just a bad football game this Sunday. What can you say? Two teams that are not very good. And then for DVOA, it just says it as well. The Football Outsiders Advanced Football Statistic. They are the 30th worst team in football according to their DVOA, with a negative 22.3 rating or percent rating, an offense of negative 4.2, which is the 20th worst, and then the third worst defense in the entire NFL, with them sitting at the 13.9 rating, 13.9% for defense. And if you have any questions about how that DVOA works, go to Football Outsiders and check it out, because they have some pretty interesting statistical analysis there for football, which you don't really get anywhere else as far as NFL team statistics. So bad Raiders team, show it on paper, show it on tape. So it doesn't really help to get rid of your two best players, apparently.
Well, I got to love, right after Mac was traded, a couple games in the season, when John Gruden was going, man, it's tough to find a good pass rusher. And you're like, oh my gosh, that is like the worst thing you could have ever said in that moment. If Vance Joseph said that, I mean, fans would have been lining up with pitchforks and torches to burn the place down.
Imagine if he'd said that after trading Von Miller or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how stupid that is. Anyway, some unique stats for this game. Derek Carr has been sacked on 27.6% of his dropbacks when pressured this season. It's third highest rate of any quarterback. So, I mean, it's not only that he's getting pressured, it's that he's getting sacked in the process. One great player that they've had this year, Rodney Hudson. You talked about him a little bit earlier. He's been one of the best centers in football. He has not allowed a single pressure in 11 of the 14 games they've played this season.
Wow. He's good, yo.
Yeah.
Remember, we had Brandon Thorne on here, listeners, over the bye week for the Broncos, and he said that for his money this season, the best center in football is Rodney Hudson. So there you go. That backs it up.
Yeah, the stats back it up for sure. I know I kind of made fun of PFF earlier, but this is something that kind of just sticks out. Raiders' offensive line is graded out as the 30th best offensive line in football, and that's with Rodney Hudson grading out as one of the best centers in football. So it just shows how bad everybody else around him has been. You consider a couple years ago, they were considered right there with the Cowboys and Steelers as one of those top three offensive lines. And so it's just amazing how quickly things can fall apart and how quickly things can build up in the NFL too. I mean, that's the great thing is you have a bad season, hey, things can turn real quickly for a team if they get the right players. But one of the worst players for them this year, Kolton Miller. Now, we've talked about it on this show. We celebrated when the Raiders made that pick. I mean, I remember jumping out of my chair because, one, I thought they were going to get Derwin James, and I was going to be really upset. And two, Kolton Miller, just one of the players that I watched. I'm sitting here going, who's giving this guy first-round credit? I mean, he just looks terrible on tape. And then the Raiders take him in the first round. But he's allowed a league high in both sacks allowed at 14, which is why I said that Bradley Chubb could break the sack record this week. And then he's also given up the most total pressures allowed at 59 this season.
Kolton Miller should just let him get the sack record. That way he can be like famous and he'll be in all the highlights, Bradley Chubb's sack record, and you can look, Mom, I'm on TV.
It's like in basketball when you get your picture taken when you're getting jammed on.
Posterized.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. So that would be good. That would be, hey, maybe Chubb can even not only break the sack record, but create some space, get him up to 18 sacks.
Oh man,
something crazy.
Yeah, have himself one of those Khalil Mack games against what was his name for the Broncos?
Schofield.
Yeah, Schofield. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, this is man. That would be awesome if Chubb could break the sack record. That's the main thing I'm going for down the stretch this season. Doesn't even have to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, although if he breaks the sack record, he should get Defensive Rookie of the Year. But I get it if they gave it to Derwin James or Darius Leonard even. But that's the main thing I'm going for. Maybe he can get it this week. That would maybe at least give me a moral victory on the season. All right, well, moving ahead now to key matchups. We got a few here. The number one for me this week is watching Will Parks and the Broncos linebackers versus Jared Cook. We've seen what happens when an opposing team, we know their best weapon is a tight end. You have to do everything you can to stop that one viable weapon, and that seems like this is this week as well. So we need to see these guys step up. The coaches need to scheme it better. They did pretty good against Njoku this week with Cleveland, who's a pretty viable, a dynamic weapon as well. But Jared Cook has been doing well. I think he had a good week 2 against the Broncos as well. So watching Will Parks and the Broncos linebackers, that second level of defense, how they do against the tight end is a huge key matchup that'll go a long way in determining if the Broncos end up winning in this game. The next one that I have here is the Broncos interior offensive line versus PJ Hall, Maurice Hurst, and Jonathan Hankins. The Broncos interior offensive line has been getting beat up the last few weeks, and the Raiders have put in some investments on this interior defensive line. I mean, they got Justin Ellis as well, who I believe was a 4th-round pick a few years ago as a nose tackle. Jonathan Hankins was a 2nd-round pick. He's just an absolute hoss of a man at nose guard for them. And then PJ Hall and Maurice Hurst can get after the quarterback. So this is a game where the Raiders haven't been getting much pressure like we talked about, and it's got the Broncos offensive line a chance to maybe get back on the horse as far as playing a little better. And then finally, we'll do this one together, but we kind of talked about it already. Colton Miller versus Bradley Chubb is a big one. But also at right tackle, you got Brandon Parker, who was a 3rd-round pick this season for the Raiders, against Von Miller. So arguably one of the worst tackle duos in the NFL goes against arguably one of the best edge rushing duos in the NFL this week.
It's kind of opposite of what was I thinking a couple weeks ago when the Broncos were playing against some pretty good tackles and had a lot more luck up the middle. Yeah, this week it's those outside guys can just go and have some fun. Kind of like last week against the Browns, where they were able to win a lot of those battles one-on-one. One of the key matchups for me is rookie receivers for the Broncos versus this bad secondary for the Raiders. I thought the rookie receivers looked pretty well last week. I mean, they're getting open, they're making some plays, they're making some tough catches, and they seem to be getting a little bit more in sync on what to do on this offense. But it's just this is one of those games where you got to prove to the Broncos they don't need to add more to this position. I mean, that's exactly what the rest of these games are. These last 2 games are guys proving to the front office that they are players they can move forward with, that they're not just
next year. Exactly.
I mean, everybody's playing for their jobs here moving forward. And these rookie receivers, right now, if I was the Broncos, I'd be sitting here saying, I think we need a veteran to join this group.
Absolutely.
If they can go out there and really show well these last couple games, then maybe you start thinking it's not as big a need. Maybe we can put money elsewhere. But right now, definitely, I'm sitting here saying they need a veteran to lead this group. I don't trust these rookies to develop more and more and more like they need to without that veteran being there.
I can't say that I disagree at all, and it's really unfortunate that Emmanuel Sanders got that injury that he did, because this team really could use him. And sure. not just this season, but like going forward. Like, he's a good complementary piece to what they have in Sutton, Patrick, and Hamilton, and that injury sucks. So we'll see what happens with him going forward, if he's going to be a viable piece for this team. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Do you have any other key matchups you want to hit on?
Yeah, I wanted to hit on, you kind of talked about it earlier, of this offense goes better when the tight ends are going. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to see, kind of like you said, they did well in the first half and then they went away from it in the second half. Can they sustain that for an entire game? Make teams have to respect the tight ends going out there for a pass catch. It kind of seemed like that first half they didn't respect it and it was open. Second half they started respecting it a little bit more, which is great, but you still got to go out there and then make other plays to other players. If they're committing more to stopping a certain player, then you look elsewhere. And right now the Broncos have struggled to find those secondary and third pieces of targets of who to go after. So I want to see the tight ends have that complete game.
Yeah. I don't know if they have that physical ability to do it. So we'll see. This is a game, though, where they can, because the Raiders are absolute trash in the second level of the defense and up the middle. You know, we complain about the Broncos being bad there, but this is an even worse one. All right, well, we're about to get out of here pretty soon, but before we do, let us tell you about why you need to become a Mile High Huddle VIP subscriber. Mile High Huddle's approach to covering the Broncos isn't just about reporting the news, although we do pride ourselves in being able to relay you all the news as it's happening in real time. But what we like to do is bring you an in-depth perspective for covering the Broncos. From an all-22 film reviews, X's and O's, deep dive and player evaluations, and coming up some draft analysis as well. We save our best and most in-depth content for our premium members, the VIP subscribers. To become a Mile High Huddle VIP and get access to 100% of our written analysis and the VIP Insider Forums, just click on the green banner on the top of the website. Click the monthly or annual option and you'll be locked in. From there, you get access to everything that we produce, which includes any insider information we pick up along the way. We work hard to bring you the best Broncos coverage and analysis on the web, so we ask you for your support by becoming a VIP subscriber. Pull the trigger, and you have my word, you will not be disappointed. All right, well, now we got the coaching corner coming up, and I will kick us off here. I have the Broncos offense versus the Raiders defense. And, Carl, this is something you talked about a little bit here with the pass rush of the Raiders being putrid, and I think that's big for the Broncos, but I think it's also big that they need to establish their will on the opposing defense. And what does that mean? They need to get the run game going. I know that it's a game where Phillip Lindsay, they can do stuff to limit him, but I think you got to just keep going back to the well this game. The Raiders don't have a great offense. They're one of the worst defenses in the NFL in stopping the run. So I think you just need to take the ball out of Keenum's hands and hand it off to Royce Freeman, Devontae Booker, Phillip Lindsay. Keep this game ugly, keep it on the ground, keep control of it, and eventually you should have the punches to do it. And then if you can get them on their heels there, that's when the passing game opens up vertically. You can get the play action and whatnot and be even a little bit more aggressive down the field with some more 5-step drops, 7-step drops, et cetera, depending on how the offensive line is doing in the game. But given that the Raiders' pass rush is so putrid, you can actually afford to do some more longer developing pass plays. So that's my quick take on the Broncos offense versus the Raiders defense. You got to take advantage of how bad they are versus the ground and then let that open up the pass game.
I like it. Well, the Broncos defense versus the Raiders offense, it really comes down to, and we said this when the Broncos played the 49ers, of shutting down their tight end. Well, it's that again, shut down Cook. Whatever you did in the second half against the 49ers, do here with Cook. Double team him, whatever it's going to take, because he's the one guy, the one offensive weapon that can really embarrass a team. And beyond that, I'm playing a lot of man coverage, and I'm being a bit more aggressive in this game because their weapons just are not that great. And I'm forcing Carr to hold on to the ball a bit longer. If Osemele can't go, they just lost their right guard. They have rookie tackles. This is a game where you can get a lot of pressure on Carr, and he doesn't handle pressure well. So make them have to hold on to the ball. The last time the Broncos played him, I'll say I didn't completely disagree with the game plan, but I thought there was times where the Broncos should have been a little bit more aggressive. They kind of just let Carr complete everything. And there's been a lot of teams that have kind of played this of, hey, make him have to go the entire length of the field, completing pass after pass after pass. This one, get a little after him. Like I said, this offensive line, if they're going to have new pieces in there, this is a game to do some delayed blitzes, kind of like what teams are doing to the Broncos. Confuse those guys. Make them have to communicate at a level that they're probably not prepared to do. And beyond that, I mean, the run game's not that great either. I mean, I just think this is one of those games where you can play like teams have been playing the Broncos the last couple of weeks of get up near the line of scrimmage and force Carr to have to make some big-time plays with pressure in his face.
Yeah, that's big. And then hopefully with that, we'll create turnovers. And that's what it's all about. All right, well, we're getting to the end of the episode here, and now we got our prediction. And I'll go first here. I have the Broncos winning this game. I believe the spread is 2.5 right now, favoring Denver. And I have them just covering the spread with a Broncos victory 20-17 in a low-scoring and tight contest. The Raiders secure a top 3 pick, and the Broncos, maybe it's better for them long-term if they lose this game to get a better draft pick and push the Raiders down, but you can't cheer for the Broncos to lose against the Raiders, even if that makes sense from a pure number standpoint. Sometimes it has to go beyond numbers, and that's hard for me to say, being a total analytic person, but it is what it is. So I have the Broncos winning 20-17.
I'm going to go Broncos 27, Raiders 13. I'm going to see – I don't think they're going to play some of those players that are injured that are questionable. Just it's that end of the year. There's nothing that they're playing for. So why go out and have Conley have to play or Osemele have to play? It just doesn't make a lot of sense at this time for them. So because of that, I think the Broncos are going to be able to get a lot of pressure. I think there's going to be a couple turnovers, maybe even a defensive touchdown in this game. And with the run game, I think they're going to actually get that going a little bit. And I just think they're going to have a pretty decent game this week.
All right. Well, it's that time, I guess, officially. Some draft content coming at you for the Building the Broncos podcast. I almost said huddle up. That's Chad and Zach's domain. But I think a good question here to start off with our draft content. We're going to have a lot of time to get into a lot of these players. But I think that the most important thing for us right now is looking at the Broncos' first pick. Right now, they are projected to pick 13th overall. It could be anywhere from, the 10th overall pick to probably around 18. So that's a big variable range, unfortunately, for the Broncos due to their incredible strength of schedule. The big reason is because how good the Chiefs and the Chargers are raising the strength of schedule. But the Broncos right now, picking 13. Who would be your top 3 players at 13 overall for the Broncos to consider if you were running the Broncos and this draft?
All right. Well, you hope for quarterback, but the odds of the top quarterback falling to the Broncos at that pick, very, very slim.
Okay, what quarterbacks do you think will not be there at 13? I guess is the first question.
Dwayne Haskins won't be there.
Okay.
I don't see him making it past probably about pick 6 right now, which is where the Jaguars are.
I think somebody trades up to get him.
I do. I mean, that's why I'm saying he doesn't get past 6.
Yeah.
That's his latest that he's probably going to go in this draft, and I can see Jacksonville trading up to get him.
Yeah.
I can see the Broncos trading up to get him.
I think if he comes out, he'll be a top 3 pick.
Yep. I can't disagree with that. Herbert, if he comes out, he's going to be a top 5 pick as well. So if Broncos want their quarterback, that's where they're going to have to get to. Otherwise, I just can't see quarterback being top talent at where they're going to be. So my top guys that are probably going to be around that area, I would start looking at, I love Jeffrey Simmons. There's going to be some questions on his off the field stuff that you're going to have to look at. Jonah Williams, I've seen him all over the board. It's kind of crazy. I just don't know where exactly he's going to go, but he's one of those guys that's kind of plug and play. You can put him pretty much anywhere in the offensive line, and I think that guy's just going to dominate for you. Depending on some of this depends on what they do with free agency, obviously, but he's another guy that maybe could be where the Broncos are going to be at. And then to think you got to look a little bit secondary wise, maybe. I've soured on Greedy Williams a little bit just with how down he's been a little bit this year, but maybe some of that's just trying to protect himself for the NFL. Byron Murphy, I love his attitude that he brings. He's a little bit small for the position, and I think he plays sometimes a little too aggressive. And I think he goes for the big hit when he should be working to protect himself just a little bit more. But again, he's one of those guys that I think he fits well with what the Broncos want to do on defense. So there's a few names that I would throw out, depending on where they're picking, I guess. If it's pick number 10 compared to pick number 18, that's a big difference in the level of talent that you're talking about. But
top 3.
Top 3. Okay, well, at 10, I guess then I'm looking at Jeffrey Simmons is one. Jonah Williams is another. Who's going to be my other one? Who else would I really, really want there that maybe is that dream pick that could maybe make it to the Broncos?
At 10 overall?
At 10 overall.
Ed Oliver. People are concerned about the size.
Yeah. And I guess if he's there, yeah, he'd definitely have to be my pick. People said the same thing about Donald. And look where he's at. He's top interior player on the defense. He's top defensive player in the NFL right now. And so sometimes I think people get too caught up in the size measurements.
Yeah.
That they just miss how special a player really is.
Yeah.
So yeah, if he's there at 10, I'm running to the podium.
Yep, he's the dream pick that maybe falls because of the size questions, but if he falls to 10 and you can put him between Vaughn and Chubb, I don't think he's as good as Quinnen Williams, but he's still an elite level edge rushing or a pass rushing prospect. So, all right, yeah, not bad for me. My 3 that you didn't list, I do love Jeffrey Simmons. Christian Wilkins is another one to look out for there, but I'm going to go with either of those linebackers that might be coming out. We'll see if they do come out, but I think Devin White or Mac Wilson playing linebacker for the Broncos, they both add a skill set that this team has lacked at that second level of the defense for years. Gosh, long time. And the Broncos might be changing defensive schemes this offseason. If they go to more of a 4-3 base front, Broncos need another linebacker that can go out there and run around and cover some guys and play sideline to sideline. So if you can get a Mack Wilson or a Devin White that can play off-ball linebacker for you and bring some more athleticism and coverage ability, that I think that's a big get for this defense. Another position that we haven't seen the Broncos prioritize as much, but could be a position where you have a chance to take a great player, is safety. And I'm talking Deontay Thompson. He is a cover one safety, and he's by far the best one in this draft. And the cover ones, I feel like, are not as valuable as they used to be, given that the league is becoming more quick pass, space game rather than vertical deep balls. But still, if you can get a safety with the ability to track and cover the last third of the field, like Thompson, and take the ball away with the pass rushers, I think that's a huge get. So I'll go with the two linebackers, Mack Wilson and Devin White, and then also Deontay Thompson from Alabama. Just some guys that not really the biggest need positions for the Broncos. I'm not going to call it that, but potential difference makers on this end of the field that the Broncos just really haven't had for a while. And they need some more players in that back seven that can do stuff like this.
I almost went with Thompson. I mean, I've just been hearing some things about the Broncos really targeting safety and possibly in free agency.
Yeah.
So I was kind of staying away from that a little bit. But if they don't go safety in free agency, then Deontay Thompson, definitely a guy that would be great to add to the secondary. I mean, you're talking about going from a moped to Yamaha bike. I mean, not Yamaha.
Yamaha.
Yeah, Yamaha bike. There we go.
Yamaha. You're getting a Yamaha.
Yeah. That's what I'm getting for Christmas. Yeah. No. But I mean, you're talking just going from Darian Stewart to Deontay Thompson. Oh my gosh. That is such a drastic change in athleticism in that secondary. I don't think you could have much more of a drastic change than going from Stewart to Thompson.
I got one for you. Delpit.
Well, he's not eligible.
Gosh, man, Grant Delpit, he'd be a top 8 pick in this draft. He is just as good as Derwin James.
I can't disagree with you, but like I said, I'm looking at actual real players that we can get this year. Next year, that's a guy that we'll be talking about if we don't get a safety this year. But no, he's definitely a huge talent. But Thompson added to this defense takes it to a whole new level for sure.
Yeah, I can't disagree because that was my pick. So there you go. We're going to be bringing you guys a lot more draft coverage. That's just kind of some names to have in the know for you guys. But that's going to take us to the end of this episode. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head on over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' content, not just related to the Broncos or draft, but all things, NFL, scheme, talent evaluation, coaching search, et cetera, et cetera. You're not going to want to miss any of it. Head on over to iTunes as well and leave us a 5-star rating and comment. Your support can help us continue to bring you our Denver Bronco deep dives. We aren't just here to bring you the news, but an in-depth analysis each week from team building, game planning, and 365 days of covering the Denver Broncos. You can follow the Building the Broncos podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast on iTunes and for Android users, Stitcher, as well as check us out on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at Huddle Up Pod and at BTB Football Pod. Again, please be sure to subscribe and rate us and reach out to us as we love interacting with fellow Bronco fans. For Carl Dumler, I'm Nick Kendell, wrapping up another episode of Building the Broncos. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next week. Even though this team is down, gotta say it, go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.